On February 1st, 1887, a small group of survivors from the wreck of the Lady Vane were, for all intents and purposes, lost to the Pacific Ocean.
Just gone. Swallowed by the sea.
Exactly. But then, almost a year later, 11 months and 4 days later, to be exact, one of them, a man named Edward Prendick, just reappears.
And he's not found on some passing steamer. He's picked up in a tiny open boat way off the normal shipping lanes.
A boat, and you have to love this detail, named the Ipecacuanha.
Which is just perfect, isn't it?
Yeah.
And, the immediate aftermath of his return is almost as telling as the insane story he's about to tell.
Oh, absolutely, because the narrative he gives, this account of scientific monstrosity, of moral collapse, it's so completely beyond what anyone could believe.
No one took him seriously. At all.
He was basically written off, wasn't he? The medical community saw him as a textbook case of, stress-induced delusion or amnesia.
Right. Extreme trauma at sea. The papers called him supposed demented.
And eventually he just gives up. He capitulates and claims he can't remember anything from those 11 months.
But he left behind a manuscript that insists on a truth that completely shattered him. And that's what we're diving into today.
And there was one tiny piece of verifiable evidence, right? A geographical footnote.
A very small one. Noble's Isle. It's a real place, a small volcanic speck on the map, right in the general area he claimed his ordeal took place.
But when a ship, the HMS Scorpion, finally goes to check it out in 1891, they find nothing.
Nothing. Just some white moths, some feral hogs and rabbits, and these peculiar-looking rats. No sign of a laboratory, no mad scientist, and certainly no beast people.
Which leaves us with the manuscript. That's all we have. And today we're going deep into Prendick's recorded memory to really analyze the dark philosophical implications of his time on Dr. Moreau's island.
We're going to focus on 3 central themes. First, the sheer agony of this unnatural creation. Second, the nature of a purely amoral, godlike intellect.
And finally, the thin, terrifying veneer of what we call humanity. What exactly did Prendick see on that island that made him look at the rest of us with absolute terror?
It's a fascinating and disturbing question.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We have to start, I think, with the state Prendick was in before he ever laid eyes on Moreau or his island.
Right, because he wasn't rescued as a whole man. He was already profoundly broken.
The sources detail the sinking of the Lady Vane and then 8 horrific days drifting in a dinghy. He's with 2 other men, a sailor and a passenger named Helmar.
And their water ran out on day 4. You can just imagine the sheer grinding agony of that. Thirst, starvation, the sun beating down.
The text describes it in gruesome detail. They're just watching each other, knowing the thought that's hovering unspoken between them.
That mutual suspicion. They can't even speak by the end, just communicating with their eyes. It's become totally primal.
And then it happens. Helmar proposes the unthinkable, drawing lots.
Prendick is horrified at first. He says he'd rather die, be eaten by the sharks. But that animal drive to survive, that craving for water.
Which, of course, the promise of blood offered. It pushes him to agree.
And the lot falls on the sailor, who, naturally, doesn't accept his fate. He fights back against Helmar.
In that brutal struggle, they both go overboard. And they both drown.
Leaving Prendick utterly alone, and his reaction is key, I think. He describes himself just laughing. This terrible, involuntary fit of laughter that he says caught him like a thing from without.
So right there, that tells you everything about his state of mind. He's not a clean slate. He's a witness who is already fractured by extreme trauma and, let's face it, an ethical collapse.
He's already seen the beast in man before he's even met the beast folk.
His rescue does absolutely nothing to soothe that trauma. He gets pulled aboard this schooner, the Ipecacuanha, captained by this drunken brute named Davies, and that's where he meets Montgomery.
Montgomery, a young, sort of disgraced medical man, and the entire ship, from the moment Prendick steps on board, is just deeply unsettling.
The first signs are sensory, aren't they? They build this incredible sense of dread.
Yeah, he notes this persistent metallic banging from the hold, like a bedstead being knocked about. And then, much more ominously, this low, guttural, angry growling.
A growling from somewhere on the deck, and the ship itself is just filthy.
It's not just messy, it's repulsive. The deck is covered in what he calls an indescribable filth, littered with bits of carrot and shreds of green stuff.
Like they're feeding a bunch of herbivores, but with a total lack of order or cleanliness. It just screams that something is wrong.
And then he gets his first real glimpse of the island's influence. Montgomery's attendant, Mulling.
At first, Prendick just registers him as this extremely clumsy, misshapen man. But when he looks closer,
The details are profoundly disturbing. He has a crooked back, a hairy neck, and this projecting face.
that face is the key. Prendick sees it as dimly suggestive of a muzzle.
And he's got these huge, protruding white teeth and eyes that are constantly bloodshot. He moves awkwardly and when he tries to come near the stern.
Montgomery's reaction is immediate and severe.
He just snaps at him. You have no business here, you know. Your place is forward.
It's this strange mix of possessiveness and a very real threat.
Yeah.
And later, when the drunken captain beats Emling, Montgomery warns him in these chilling terms to keep his hands off that man of mine.
So you know immediately, Emling isn't a servant. He's property. He's controlled by fear.
And the cargo just adds another layer of dread. You've got these muzzled staghounds.
The muzzles suggest they're dangerous.
Or valuable, or both. Then there are hutches of rabbits, a llama, and then the centerpiece of the collection.
The puma. A huge, ferocious puma crammed into this tiny iron cage. It's so small, the poor thing can barely move.
The sheer contained rage of that animal just mirrors the entire atmosphere of the ship, doesn't it?
It really does. And Montgomery is completely evasive about where they're going. He just says an island where I live. So far as I know, it hasn't got a name. He just shuts down any real questions.
So when they finally arrive at this unnamed island, the feeling shifts from just uncanny to overtly bizarre, almost instantly.
Yeah, the boatmen who come out to get them, I mean, their physical appearance is just shocking.
He calls them strange, brutish-looking fellows. And they're wearing this dirty white cloth swathing that covers their whole bodies, right down to their fingers and feet.
It's like they're trying to hide their forms. Or maybe they just can't wear normal clothes properly.
And Prendick details the abnormalities.
Yeah.
Elfin faces, he calls them, with these prominent lower jaws and really disproportionate bodies.
Specifically, he says they have abnormally long bodies and the thigh part of the leg short and curiously twisted.
These are not just, some uncontacted tribe. These are bodies that have been fundamentally structurally altered.
And they look at him so furtively, avoiding his eyes. The repulsion he feels is immediate. He knows something is profoundly manufacturedly wrong here.
And then comes the name that changes everything. Montgomery greets the man who steps out of the boathouse. That one word, that's the detonator for Prendick's memory.
Suddenly, he remembers the Moreau Horrors pamphlet from 10 years back, the huge Vivisection scandal that drove this brilliant but brutal physiologist out of England.
He's a master surgeon, but his experiments, the deliberate creation of pain just for the sake of knowledge. He was basically howled out of the country.
And the final sickening confirmation for Prendick is the smell.
Yes. This faint odor he'd vaguely noticed before suddenly slams into his consciousness.
The antiseptic odor of the dissecting room.
At that moment, he knows. The entire island is a laboratory, and the horrific results of the experiments are walking all around him. His mission has gone from just surviving to witnessing a scientific nightmare.
And that really establishes this core theme of manufactured unnaturalness. Nothing here is natural. It's all surgically imposed, twisted, and you just know it's all based on agony.
Once Prendick grasps the nightmare he's in, the focus immediately shifts to one building, the enclosure with the locked inner room.
Which he instinctively and correctly dubs the House of Pain.
This place becomes the central point of terror for him and is driven entirely by sound. Moreau has brought the puma inside.
And he's begun the transformation, the noise that comes from that room. It's not just pain. It's the sound of a profound ethical violation.
Prendick hears this sharp, hoarse cry that just grows and grows in volume and intensity. He calls it such an exquisite expression of suffering that it just transcends the animal itself.
He feels in that moment that it was as if all the pain in the world had found a voice.
And this leads him to a really critical psychological point, I think. He says that if the pain had been dumb, if it had been silent, he might have been able to stand it.
But it's the audible suffering, the vocalization of it. That's what sets our nerves quivering. It's the sound that bypasses our reason and hits our empathy, our pity, our horror.
His panic just escalates until he can't take it anymore. He's convinced Moreau is vivisecting a human in there.
So he throws open the inner door.
And he's confronted with this horrifying scene. He just gets a glimpse of Moreau, white and terrible, standing over what he calls something bound painfully upon a framework, scarred, red, and bandaged.
It's like a living, grotesque sculpture of agony.
And Moreau, just furious at the intrusion, flings him back like a child. which confirms Prendick's worst fears.
His immediate conclusion is the vivisection of men was carried on here, and that's what makes him run, believing he's going to be the next one on the table.
But the truth, when Moreau finally catches him and explains it, is somehow even worse. It's colder, more philosophically damning.
Moreau doesn't torture him, he lectures him. He reveals that the creatures aren't men being tortured into beasts.
They're animals, painstakingly and surgically transformed into these rough parodies of men.
Humanized animals, as Moreau proudly calls them, triumphs of vivisection. And this is the core horror of our first theme, the idea that humanity isn't a gift or a natural state.
It's a painful surgical process forced onto innocent, unwilling creatures. Being human in this context hurts.
Moreau lays out the scientific rationale with this chilling, meticulous detail. He argues that the body is fundamentally plastic, that biological forms aren't fixed.
He brings up all these examples like grafting skin to repair a nose, or this historical oddity, Hunter's cockspur.
Where a surgeon grafted a rooster spur onto a bull's neck and it just flourished, it grew.
He even mentions more grotesque things like manufacturing monsters by transferring a slip of tail tissue to a rat's snout.
Yeah.
His whole point is that with the right knowledge, you can sculpt living forms.
He essentially sees himself as a biological architect, a grotesque sculptor. He's just building up and changing tissue, and he even compares himself to medieval doctors who manufactured dwarfs and cripples for freak shows.
And his motivation for choosing the human form, this is what gets me. It's not for some grand moral or evolutionary purpose.
No, it's pure aesthetics. He admits he chose the human form almost by chance because, he says, there is something in the human form that appeals to the artistic turn of mind.
His creations, which suffer so profoundly, are ultimately art projects. They're frivolous, which makes the pain inflicted in the House of Pain completely arbitrary and monstrous.
His stated goal is to burn out all the animal from them, to create a purely rational creature. But he immediately admits his own project is doomed. He says, the stubborn beast flesh grows day by day back again.
So the entire existence of the beast folk is just this agonizing internal war. The humanity that's been forced on them is constantly being rejected by their underlying biology.
It redefines what their suffering is. It's not just the memory of the surgery, it's the constant pain of their unnatural existence. The trauma is permanent.
Humanity, in Moreau's world, is a psychological burden and a surgical scar that's always itching, always pulling them back to what they were. It's fundamentally unsustainable without a tyrant to enforce it.
A tyrant who is a god in his own mind.
That terrifying idea leads us right to the source of the tyranny, the mind behind the scalpel. We have to look at Dr. Moreau himself as the quintessential cold god.
He is pure, emotionless intellect operating completely outside the boundaries of what we would call morality.
His cruelty isn't born from malice, is it? It's born from a profound, almost unimaginable detachment.
And that's the heart of our second theme. His main justification for inflicting all this pain is that he just dismisses ethics as a concept. It's not relevant to his work. He says it so plainly. To this day, I have never troubled about the ethics of the matter.
To Prendick, who's still haunted by the screams of the puma, this is just incomprehensible. But Moreau has a way of defining pain that lets him sidestep it.
He tells Prendick that as long as the sound of pain upsets you, you are an animal, thinking a little less obscurely what an animal feels.
In Moreau's mind, empathy is a weakness. It's a vestige of the beast. To be truly advanced, truly intellectual, you have to rise above those messy physiological disturbances.
He sees pain as just a biological tool, not a moral barrier.
And he demonstrates this in the most horrifying, visceral way. He takes out a penknife.
And just plunges it into his own thigh, right in front of Prendick.
Just to prove a point, he claims it does not hurt a pinprick.
And this isn't about being brave. It's about demonstrating his biological objectivity. He argues that pain is just our intrinsic medical advisor to warn us and stimulate us. It's an imperfect system, unevenly distributed.
So he just dismisses it. He dismisses the suffering of his own creations by reducing their agony to mere physiological signals that a true scientist should and must ignore.
If pain is just a flawed medical advisor, then inflicting it to achieve a great scientific goal isn't immoral. It's just a necessary step in the process. It's how he sleeps at night.
But he goes even further than that. He claims a sort of religious mandate for what he does. He's not an atheist. He's more like a distorted theologian.
He tells Prendick he's a religious man because he's seeking out the fundamental laws of existence. He claims to have seen more of the ways of this world's maker than anyone.
He sees himself as an agent of that maker, exploring the very limits of creation.
But the maker he's emulating is a completely amoral one. His dismissal of human morality is absolute. He just scoffs at ideas like pleasure and pain.
Pleasure and pain by, he says. He thinks our obsession with feelings, with morality, is the mark of the beast upon us.
So the true motive is pure, cold, intellectual passion. Nothing else matters. Once an animal is on his operating table, it stops being a fellow creature. It becomes a problem.
His only driving force is the desire to find out the extreme limit of plasticity in a living shape. He's a creator, but only for the sake of answering a question.
This scientific purity, in a way, makes him so much worse than a typical villain. There's no emotional reason for his cruelty. He doesn't hate the animals. He doesn't enjoy their pain.
Doesn't care. They're like clay to him, inert matter to be molded.
And his history of failures really highlights the terrifying, arbitrary nature of this cold creation. He tells Prendick he started with a sheep.
And he made this grotesque thing, a thing of pain and fear that still only had the mind of a sheep, so he killed it. It was a disappointment.
Even his so-called successes were limited. His first real man was made from a gorilla, molded into what he calls the Negroid type. But he had to painstakingly teach it language, teach it the basics of morality. None of it came naturally.
But the absolute worst of his creations was the purely experimental one, the thing.
This creature was never even finished. It was limbless, it just writhed along the ground, and it had this horrible, agonized face. It was immensely strong, but in constant infuriating pain because its body was so unstable.
And that creature ended up killing a Kanaka man, a laborer on the island. Montgomery, the only other human, had to shoot it.
Which just shows the complete lack of accountability in Moreau's work. He creates this walking vessel of agony and chaos, and when it goes wrong, he just shrugs, discards the failure, and moves on to the next process.
Is a god who treats life as utterly disposable.
And that cold, calculated cruelty is what sets the stage for the final, inevitable collapse of his entire project. Because even a god, cold or otherwise, can't hold back biology forever.
Which brings us to the third theme, the one that ultimately shatters Prendick. The reversion. The inevitable return of the beast.
Moreau wasn't a fool. He knew the animal was always fighting to get out, which is why he created his masterwork of social control. The law.
The law is Moreau's sociological cage. It's a basic religion built on one thing and one thing only: sheer terror of the surgeon, the fear of returning to the house of pain.
And the way the law is phrased is so fascinating. It's this rhythmic, chanted litany, and it's all about negation. It's about all the things they must not do to be men.
Not to go on all fours, that is the law. Are we not men? Not to suck up drink, that is the law. Not to eat fish or flesh, that is the law.
They're defining their new humanity by constantly rejecting their deepest, most primal instincts.
And the chant ends by explicitly making Moreau into their god and their devil all at once. His is the house of pain. His is the hand that makes, that wounds, that heals.
Prendick sees the devastating irony, doesn't he? After Moreau brutalized their bodies, he infected their dwarfed brains with a kind of deification of himself.
Montgomery explains it as a kind of hypnotic suggestion, reinforced by terror. But this law is in a constant, exhausting battle with their animal cravings.
A struggle that gets much worse at night when the rational part of the brain weakens and the instincts start to surge.
And you can see that struggle physically in them. Despite this enforced humanity, Prendick can always see the taint of their original species.
You have the hyena swine with its obvious snout, the fox bear woman with her cunning eyes, the leopard man whose movements are just a little too fluid, too predatory.
They're all structurally compromised. The hunched shoulders that want to drop to all fours, the projecting lower jaw that still looks like a muzzle, the malformed hands. Every part of them is screaming about the botched, painful surgery they endured.
And the trigger for the final, catastrophic collapse of the law is something so simple, so primal.
The taste of blood.
When Prendick and Montgomery find a rabbit that's been violently killed, its backbone bitten clean through, Montgomery knows it's the beginning of the end.
Because the beast people are forbidden from eating meat, especially fresh blood. That's the quickest way back to the kill instinct.
The memory of the hunt is just too strong. The taste of blood proves the law is just a thin behavioral coding. This leads directly to the hunt for the leopard man who broke the law.
And watching this horrifying chase and execution, Prendick has this terrible revelation. He realizes these creatures were probably happy as living things may be before Moreau got to them.
But now they've stumbled in the shackles of humanity. They lived in a constant fear, fretted by a law they could not understand. Their whole existence is this cruel internal struggle.
And that struggle comes to a definitive, bloody end when their god is destroyed.
The whole thing kicks off when the puma, during an operation, manages to break loose from its restraints.
And Moreau, the master manipulator of living flesh, dies quickly and brutally. The escaped puma attacks him, and it batters his head in with the very iron fetters he was using to control it.
He is killed by his own creation. The one force holding the law together is extinguished by the very biological force he thought he could master.
Moreau's death triggers immediate chaos, especially for the island's only other civilized human, Montgomery.
He just collapses. Moreau was the singular, terrible figure who gave his outcast life some kind of meaning. Without him, Montgomery descends into this nihilistic despair.
He calls Prendick a solemn prig and announces he's going to have a damned bank holiday.
And his idea of a celebration is the ultimate act of self-destruction. He deliberately gives the beast people raw brandy. He encourages them to indulge.
He tries to find fellowship with them through intoxication, and it's the final match on the powder keg. The whole thing devolves into this terrifying bonfire on the beach.
The creatures are screaming, more, more. For the alcohol, they turn violent and they systematically destroy the boats, the only connection to the outside world.
The night ends with the deaths of both Montgomery and Milling, the faithful dog man, who dies with his neck bitten open, still gripping the brandy bottle. His loyalty and his fragile humanity just dissolved by a human vice.
And Prendick, watching from the ruins, becomes a documentarian of the end. He chronicles the swift, inevitable collapse of the remaining beast folk.
Without Moreau, their god, the law just loses all its power. The degradation is immediate and total.
The first thing to go is language. Their carefully taught words lose all meaning, becoming mere lumps of sound.
Their forced upright posture becomes a struggle. They start running on their toes and fingertips again.
All the old instincts come flooding back. They start gnawing their food, sucking water from streams, abandoning their clothes. All sense of decency or shame, it just vanishes.
Even the ape man, who used to love talking about big things, just devolves. He starts jabbering more and more simian. All his pride and his new intellect is gone.
Civilization, enforced by pain and fear, is exposed as a temporary, fragile lie. As soon as the authority is gone, the animal surges back quickly and inevitably.
Prendick then has to spend months hiding, just watching them scatter back into the jungle, becoming nocturnal predators again. The island finds a new, terrifying, primal equilibrium.
He finally escapes on a makeshift raft and is picked up, ironically, by the same ship, the Ipecacuanha, after drifting for 3 days. His body recovers, but his mind is permanently scarred.
He says he feels no great desire to see men again, just relief to be quit of the foulness of the beast people.
But the real horror is, the island never leaves him. He gets back to London, the supposed peak of civilization, and he doesn't find comfort. He finds more dread.
He says he's haunted by this overwhelming fear that the men and women I met were not also another beast people.
That they were just animals half wrought into the outward image of human souls, and that they would presently begin to revert.
This is the final cynical lens the story leaves us with. He looks at the people of London, the epitome of Victorian society, and all he can see are barely restrained animals. He sees the city's laws as being just as fragile as Moreau's chant.
He dissects everyone he sees with this terrifying cynicism. The prowling women, the furtive, craving men, the workers with tired eyes and eager paces, like wounded deer dripping blood.
Every little action, every look, suggests an animal struggling inside its cage.
He sees their entire moral life as a facade, a temporary lie. He goes to a church for comfort, but the preacher's sermon just sounds like meaningless gibberish to him.
He says the man gibbered big things, even as the ape man had done. The spiritual life of London is just a more polished version of the beast folk's empty rituals.
Even in a library, a place of pure intellect, he sees people bent over their books not as scholars, but as patient creatures waiting for prey.
The experience just fundamentally shatters his faith in humanity. He sees the only difference between a civilized man and a beast man as surgical and behavioral, and frighteningly temporary.
He even begins to doubt his own sanity, wondering if he himself is only an animal tormented with some strange disorder in its brain.
His only defense against this paranoia is to retreat. He moves away from the confusion of cities, choosing to live in solitude, surrounded by the cold certainty of scientific books.
And he dedicates his nights to astronomy. He clings to the vast and eternal laws of matter because they are a fixed, predictable counterpoint to the moral and biological chaos he witnessed on that island.
The story ends with this profound paradox. Prendick escaped the island, but he never escaped its conclusion. He traded the company of the beast folk for the paranoia that everyone he meets is just a beast wearing clothes.
So was the true horror of the island not that Moreau turned animals into men, but that Prendick saw that men are animals, struggling in this painful, temporary condition we call civilization, and that the only difference between the beast folk and the citizens of London is that the beast folk's surgical scars are on the outside, while ours are just deeper and more psychologically hidden. He's left waiting for the law to break, convinced that just beneath the surface, the animal is waiting for its chance to kill.